and a very warm welcome to all of you listening. I hope that you are all fit and well. You join me today as we continue on with our journey through the book of Daniel. Today we are picking up at the midway point of chapter number 2. Our reading is verses 36 to 45. So this is Daniel chapter 2, verses 36 to 45. This is the dream. Now we will tell the interpretation of it before the king. You, O king, are a king of kings. For the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the children of men dwell, all the beasts of the field and the birds of the heaven, he has given them into your hand, and has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold. But after you shall arise another kingdom, inferior to yours. Then another, a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. Yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. This is the word of the Lord. Before we look in more detail at today's passage of Scripture, let's take a few moments to briefly review where we are in the story. We find ourselves in the year of 603 BC. This was the second official year of King Nebuchadnezzar's reign. It was in this year that he began to experience some disturbing dreams. Perhaps it's more accurate to say that he had one recurring dream that troubled him greatly. He felt strongly that the dream was significant, that it carried an important message about the future. Therefore the king sought someone who could help unravel the secret of his dream. He called all of his wise men together and demanded that they reveal what he had dreamed and provide an interpretation. The mystics, psychics, and other occult practitioners of Babylon tell the king that such a thing is impossible. How could they see inside his head and determine what he had dreamt? This was something only a divine being could accomplish. Greatly angered by their time-wasting and excuses, the king issues a decree that all of the wise men will be rounded up and executed. Included here on the list of those to die were our 4 heroes, Daniel and his 3 friends. When Daniel learns of this, he persuades Arioch, the chief executioner, to tell him why the king was so angry, and then allow him to go and meet with the king. Arioch agrees, and Daniel has his audience with the king. He asks for more time so that he can seek God and provide an interpretation for the dream. The king allows him this. Daniel then returns to the others, and they throw themselves at God's mercy. They pray that God may reveal to them this secret. God does not disappoint. Daniel sees both the dream and its interpretation during a night vision. He returns to Arioch, who takes him to meet with the king. The king asks him if he is able to unravel the secret. Daniel instantly acts to draw the king away from any kind of human ability or skill. He reminds the king that all of his highly trained occult staff had been unable to furnish him with an answer. Daniel was here not because he had any special powers or that he was so much wiser than everyone else. He knew the secret only because the sovereign God of the universe had revealed it to him. The dream is a revelation of what will occur in the latter days. The king, it seems, had concerns about the future. He wondered perhaps how long he might reign and how great his empire would become. So God is giving him in this dream, revealing to him what will be in the future. The dream covers a period of time stretching from the era of Nebuchadnezzar right up to the second coming of the Messiah to earth. Last time we examined the various components of the dream. As Nebuchadnezzar slept, he dreamt of a large, powerful, and extremely bright image. As I mentioned to you last time, there was something awe-inspiring and terrible about this image. It truly terrified the king. The Bible never tells us what form the image took, but most scholars assume that it was in the form of a man, most likely a powerfully built warrior. Daniel then goes on to describe the statue by highlighting the materials from which the statue was composed. Most statues that we see today, whether in museums or in public places, are made of a single material. We see, for example, statues made of stone, marble, metal, plastic or glass. This statue's image, however, was made up of a mix of differing materials. These different materials, as we shall soon discover, were highly symbolic. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here. The head of the statue was made of gold. Gold is the most valuable and precious metal. The upper torso and arms were made of silver. Silver is also a precious metal, but not quite as desirable or as valuable as gold. If I offered you a gold or silver ring, which would you take? The lower torso, the belly and thighs, were made out of bronze. The legs were made of iron, and finally the feet were a mix of iron and clay, two materials that do not bond together. We finished up last time by talking about what happened as the king stood in awe before this image. As he stood there, a stone of divine origin flew through the air and struck the feet of the statue. This, I noted last time, was the weakest point of this structure. The stone smashes the feet and the image begins to crumble. As it falls, it disintegrates into powdery particles that are carried away by the wind. The divine stone that has destroyed this image then begins to grow, eventually becoming a mountain that fills the whole earth. This was Nebuchadnezzar's strange and disturbing dream. What does it all mean? Well, unravelling that will be the subject of our sermon today. Verse number 36. This is the dream. Now we will tell the interpretation of it before the king. Daniel has provided an accurate account of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. We know this because the king has not spoken up to challenge or question anything that Daniel has said. Daniel exhibits great confidence. This is not derived from his own insight or wisdom, but comes from complete trust or faith in God. He knows that what God has given him is the truth. He can tell the king without fear or trepidation. After explaining what made up the dream, he will move on to the all-important interpretation. What does it all mean? Note carefully how he begins. Now we will tell the interpretation. Who's the we here? Daniel is standing alone before the king. Why employ the first person plural? Actually, what it demonstrates is Daniel's humility. He is acknowledging that the interpretation is not coming from him. He neither wants the reward or credit for it. He is only able to provide the interpretation because God gave it to him. So in using we, He is directing the king's attention away from him and forcing him to think about who is really revealing or unwrapping this secret. Well, let us move on. Verses 37 and 38. You, O king, are a king of kings, for the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the birds of the heaven, he has given them into your hand, and has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold. Daniel begins in a way that today we would describe as being excessive and over-the-top flattery. This, however, was the protocol of those times. It was simply the way that one addressed a king. To break with such protocol was to risk angering said king. Now, in Nebuchadnezzar's case, there was some validity to the title King of Kings. Nebuchadnezzar was an absolute monarch. He exercised unrestricted authority over life and death throughout all of Babylon. His word was law, which meant that no prior written law could challenge his will. He was then, unquestionably, the supreme authority in the world of his day. None of the succeeding empires had a ruler that was quite like him. This will be a significant point to note as we look at all the empires mentioned in the prophetic dream. The empires that followed Babylon all had systems in which power was not centralized or focused in one single individual. Power in the other empires was shared or dispersed. This meant that they were less effective and could not rule and reign as only an absolute monarch can. When there are numerous equal stakeholders or power brokers, it means that things have to be debated and discussed before decisions can be made. This was never an issue for Nebuchadnezzar. This is how he is described by the prophet Ezekiel. For thus says the Lord God, Behold, I will bring against Tyre from the north Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, king of kings, with horses, with chariots, and with horsemen, and an army with many people. Ezekiel 26, verse 7. The prophet Jeremiah had also warned the kings of Edom, Moab, Ammon, Tyre, and Sidon that God had given Nebuchadnezzar sovereignty over the entire earth, including even the animals. Jeremiah 27, verses 6 and 7. So simply stated, Nebuchadnezzar was a powerful king who ruled with total control over everything. Daniel then quite rightly affords him the level of respect due to a man in his exalted position. The Bible does command us to respect and submit to those that God has set in power over us. But we are never to regard such people more highly than God himself. So whilst Daniel shows due deference to the king, he goes on to remind him of who it was who gave him his power, strength, and glory. It was the God of heaven, the great I Am, who allowed Nebuchadnezzar to rule and reign as he did. That's an important thing for us all to remember as we contemplate the political uncertainty in the world today. It is God who allows people, be they kings, presidents, prime ministers, or military generals, to rule. It is also God who brings their time in power to an end. They may make plans to attack and conquer other nations, but they will only succeed if God allows them. God had allowed the Babylonian Empire to expand and grow extremely rich and powerful. Its influence extended from the Mediterranean Sea all the way to India. It had the largest, most populous cities in existence at that time. Its artistic treasures, too, were a marvel to behold. God had placed Nebuchadnezzar over all of this. Now it may be true that all of the empires that followed his were greater in terms of size, but no one ever exercised absolute control as he did. He truly stood at the head of world empires. So Daniel tells him that the golden head of the dream image was the Babylonian Empire. Why gold, you may ask? Well, gold was very important in the Babylonian Empire. When the Greek historian Herodotus arrived and visited Babylon 90 years after the time of Nebuchadnezzar, he was staggered by how much gold he saw in that city. Everywhere he looked, he saw things made out of solid gold. So it was appropriate then that the statue is topped by a golden head, symbolizing the Babylonian Empire. The statue, as we shall soon discover, represented 4 successive Gentile empires. Now, historically speaking, the Babylonian Empire was an ancient one. It had its roots way back in Genesis. But the empire that Nebuchadnezzar ruled over was actually the New Babylonian Empire, the Neo-Babylonian Empire. It was founded by his father Nabopolassar in 627 BC. It fell to the Medo-Persians in 539 BC. So this mighty empire did not really last for very long. It only existed for 88 years. It burned bright, but faded quickly. Let us read on. Verse 39. But after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to yours, then another, a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. As we've just noted, 539 BC, the Babylonian Empire was conquered by the combined forces of the Medo-Persians. They are represented on the statue as the silver arms and upper torso. What, you may ask, is the significance of silver? Well, silver in Aramaic is the same word as money. So the primary characteristic of the Medo-Persian Empire would be money or silver. And history certainly bears this out. The Medo-Persian Empire developed a vast system of taxation. They required that their taxes be paid in silver, and they literally filled their coffers with huge quantities of silver. The 2 arms represent the coming together of the 2 different nations, the Medes and the Persians. Although they united, and indeed were politically and militarily successful, they never really culturally cohered. They were led by the Persian king Cyrus the Great. And this, I think, reflects that whilst they were united, the strong of the 2 nations was always the Persians. Now you may wonder, in what way was this empire inferior to the Babylonian Empire? In fact, their empire covered a larger geographical area, and it lasted much longer, about 208 years. Well, to answer this question, we need to consider things from Nebuchadnezzar's vantage point. He would have considered the Medo-Persians' system of leadership inferior to the Babylonian system. The Persian monarchs could not annul a law once it went into effect. In other words, the law was superior to the word of the monarch. This restricted the absolute authority of the king. So if an absolute monarch is the gold standard, which would have been Nebuchadnezzar's view, then the Medo-Persians are silver. What they offered was precious, strong and desirable, but not as pure and perfect as gold. The Medo-Persian Empire was conquered by the 3rd empire represented on the statue. They were the Greeks, led of course by Alexander the Great. The Persians' demise came about in 331 BC. On the statue, the Greek Empire is symbolized by the bronze belly and bronze upper thighs. Again, this metal was strongly associated with the Greeks. A Greek soldier wore a helmet of bronze and a breastplate of bronze. He carried a sword and a shield made of, you guessed it, bronze. So bronze symbolizes the military power and might of the Greek Empire. Its territory was even larger than that of Medo-Persia. Greece dominated the ancient cradle of civilization from 331 to 31 BC. So it lasted longer then than either Babylonia or Persia, lasting about 300 years. So how, once again, was the Greek Empire inferior in terms of quality than the Medo-Persian Empire? As you're probably aware, when Alexander the Great died in 323 BC, he was aged just 32. His empire was split into 4 parts. Each of Alexander's top generals took one piece. This meant, of course, that the Greek Empire lacked the unified strength of both Persia and Babylonia. Also, its democratic form of government gave more power to the people and less to the rulers at the top. It is for these reasons seen to be inferior. Let us turn then now and read about the fourth empire mentioned. Verse 40. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. The Greek Empire was finally defeated by the Romans in 31 BC. They are symbolized on the statue by the iron legs. As iron could overcome metals such as gold, silver and bronze, so would the Romans conquer the known world. The eastern and western divisions of this empire crushed all opposition with a brutal, methodical strength that easily surpassed any of its predecessors. The iron legs of their military machine trampled down all that stood in their way. In terms of its size, the Roman Empire dominated the map far more extensively than any of the preceding empires. At its height, its empire stretched across nearly all of Europe and held sway in North Africa and Eastern Asia. It also lasted far longer than the other empires. The Western Roman Empire lasted from 31 BC until 476 AD, and the Eastern Roman Empire continued up until 1453 AD. So once again we are left asking the question, in what way was this empire inferior? Well, I hope that you are beginning to identify a pattern. At the top, the golden head, the best way of governance comes through an absolute monarch. Once an absolute monarch power is diluted, the system of governance and control becomes weaker. This will certainly be the case with Rome. Rome, as it expanded, increasingly struggled with internal strife. The people in the Senate played major roles in setting its policies, and they controlled the emperors far more than had been true in any of the preceding empires. This constant infighting led to an inner weakness which ultimately brought down the empire. Well, let us continue. Verses 41 to 43. Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. We now arrive at the base of the statue, the feet and toes that are made with a mix of iron and clay. Generally speaking, biblical scholars agree on the other elements of the statue, but the same cannot be said for the feet and the toes. There is considerable debate as to whom the feet and the 10 toes represent. The feet of iron and clay are without doubt, then, the most controversial part of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. So let me begin by making a few general statements. The first thing to note is that in iron and clay we have two materials that do not bond or stick well together. Iron is a strong material, whereas clay by comparison is weak. Ancient soldiers didn't go into battle with clay swords, so any object made out of two non-adhering materials is prone to weakness. No warrior would ever construct a sword out of iron and clay. In a similar way, a kingdom that is comprised of elements that do not work well or cooperate together is compromised. The Roman Empire was a case in point. As it spread, it embraced different and diverse cultures, all the while trying to stay united. It's very difficult, perhaps impossible, to unite everyone to a single idea. This is especially true if some feel resentment at having their culture being disrespected or even trampled upon. We see a similar thing happening today, as many Western nations become increasingly multicultural. Once we introduce vast numbers of people who have different values and ideologies to the host nation, we frequently witness disunity and fracture. The strength of a nation is potentially weakened by those who do not accept the beliefs, values, or systems upon which it is built. So some commentators then think that the iron and clay represent competing systems or ideologies. For example, imperial or dictatorial rule versus democracy. Imperial power caters to the leaders, whereas democracy caters to those led. It is impossible to have both working effectively at the same time. From Nebuchadnezzar's viewpoint, rule by an absolute monarch is like iron, but once we introduce democracy, clay in this case, this pure, strong form of leadership is lost. The mention of mingling with the seed of men is also interesting here. It hints perhaps at the forced intermingling of cultures and people brought about by Rome's military conquest. As I noted before, it's very hard to get people from different cultures to agree. But it may also allude to marriage, the joining together of peoples from very diverse backgrounds. If we have two people who possess very different personalities or even worldviews coming together, what is the likely outcome? Often, sadly, the relationship is doomed to failure. So the message seems to be that Rome's marriage of iron and clay was doomed from the start, and the empire would eventually end. Many commentators then read these three verses and see them as being connected to the fourth kingdom, the Roman Empire. There, of course, may be a lot of validity to this interpretation, because as I have just laid out, many of these things align with what history has shown us. Rome was ultimately a mix of strength and weakness that did eventually succumb and collapse. However, the feet and the toes also point towards a future, final kingdom. This will be part of Daniel's prediction later in this book, in fact in Daniel chapter number 7. It's intentionally linked here with the Roman Empire for a very good reason. This is because the feet and the toes represent a revival of the old Roman Empire. It will be the last Gentile empire of history. How exactly such a grouping of nations will come into existence is of course yet to be determined. The Bible, however, on numerous occasions makes it clear that this is the future for mankind. It will comprise 10 blocks or groupings of nations into regional confederations. Where will the headquarters for this world system be? You guessed it, somewhere in the old Roman Empire of Europe. How will this system be governed or managed? Well, initially at first it seems likely that each confederation will have its own king. Eventually these kings will be replaced by a single figure, a global world leader or dictator. Who will this person be? Well, let me give you a little clue. His name begins with A and ends in Christ. I'll talk more on this a little later. Now you may think that all of this sounds completely far-fetched, but take a look at this. What you are looking at is a map of the world created by the Club of Rome back in 1973. Who, you might ask, are the Club of Rome? Well, this is how their website describes them. The Club of Rome is an organisation of individuals who share a common concern for the future of humanity and strive to make a difference. Our members are notable scientists, economists, business leaders, high-level civil servants, and former heads of state from around the world. Are they an influential group? Well, take a look at this. The pyramid on the screen provides you with a model for how the world is really governed and managed. As you can see, the Club of Rome is an important and influential think tank, so their ideas and plans potentially shape our world. On September the 17th, 1973, they released a report called The Regionalised and Adaptive Model of the Global World System, which was prepared by directors Misarovich and Pestel as part of the Strategy for Survival project. This report revealed the club's goal of dividing the world, wait for it now, into 10 political economic regions. The 10 regions would unite the entire world under a single form of government. The same plan was published in a Club of Rome book called Mankind at the Turning Point. So this is in humanity's future. When and how are questions that, at this present time, we cannot answer. All I can say is that we should be aware of the signs and trends that are gradually nudging us in this direction. Expect them to become far more obvious as the months and years roll by. Well, let us continue. Verses 44 and 45. And in the days of these kings the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw that the bronze was cut out of the mountains without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, that a great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. Daniel concludes his interpretation of the dream by bringing the stone back into focus. You will remember that Nebuchadnezzar's dream ended with a stone, uncut by human hands, hitting the feet of the image and shattering them. This in turn brought the whole edifice down. Following this, the stone became a mountain that filled the whole earth. Daniel turns his attention first to explaining when this will take place. It will be in the days of these kings. The clear and obvious reading of this is that it will take place during the time that the world has been divided up into 10 regions. This, as we noted before, is an end-time event. Now, it may be the case that the 10 kings are in place before the rapture takes place. They will definitely be in place when the 7-year tribulation begins. During the tribulation period, we see that the death and resurrection of the Antichrist leads to the killing of 3 of the 10 kings. From that time on, the world will be ruled by the Antichrist alone, with the 7 remaining kings giving their power to the Antichrist. This period of time will come to an end by the appearance of the stone. A stone or a rock is a frequent symbol of God and Jesus Christ in Scripture. So in the prophecy, the stone signifies an internal kingdom that God himself will establish. This is the kingdom ruled by our Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ, who proceeds from God the Father, referred to here as the mountain. The kingdom that Christ establishes will demolish all the kingdoms that exist at that time. Also, unlike all of the human kingdoms of the past, God's kingdom will last forever. When Christ returns at the second coming, he will rule and reign for 1,000 years. At the end of this time, the present heavens and earth is to be destroyed and is to be replaced by the new heavens, earth, and Jerusalem. It is in this realm that we will live with God for all of eternity. Daniel concludes his prophecy in a very careful and precise way. He tells the king that all he has just told him comes directly from the sovereign God of the universe. He has not added to or embellished anything that has been said. Because this has come from God, it can be wholly and fully be trusted. As I've pointed out on many occasions over the recent weeks, God cannot lie. He keeps his promises. So Nebuchadnezzar should have no doubts about the dream's interpretation. Equally, we too should have no doubts that what God has revealed in his word will indeed come to pass. But next time, Lord willing, we will look at the king's response to Daniel's interpretation. But let us conclude today by thinking about what we can learn from our account. Lessons to learn. I have 3 lessons that I have drawn from today's study. Number 1. It all rests in God's mighty hands. Any keen student of history will tell you that the past is made up of one empire succeeding another. We saw that today as Daniel explained the symbolism of the statue. No doubt each of the empires at their height thought that they were invincible, that their armies, their skills and expertise meant that they could not be defeated or conquered. They were all proven to be wrong in this assessment. All empires have their time and die. In fact, all things go through 5 discernible stages: birth, growth, maturity, decline, and then death. Empires, then, are no different from squirrels, trees, or human beings. The main point that Daniel is making to King Nebuchadnezzar, though, is that God is the one overseeing all of this. The king's power and authority came from God. He had the right to withdraw it at any moment. It makes no difference how powerful a man you are and how big and mighty your empire. God ultimately controls it all. It all rests in his mighty hands. This means that we do not need to feel stressed out about the men or nations today, or who might arise in the future, who threaten our safety and security. We may worry about tyrants like Vladimir Putin or Kim Jong-un, but the truth is, however, that we do not have to concern ourselves with these things. Just like the empires of old, all their power too lies in God's mighty hands. Therefore we can trust him to do what is best and right in every situation. Number 2. We should expect decline and decay. One of the most difficult things about living thousands of miles away from your family and loved ones is not being able to physically see them very often. Today, thankfully, modern technology makes it much easier to talk and to see each other through programs on the computer, such as Skype and Zoom. These things weren't available when I first moved to Korea, so often several years went by before I could return to the UK in person. I was always a little shocked by just how much people had aged. When you see people all the time, you don't notice, but when distance separates, you easily forget about the passage of time. We are all getting older, and part of that process results, I'm afraid, in decline and decay. We all wish that wasn't the case, but we must face reality. The same thing is also happening to the world around us. We might like to imagine that we are always progressing and improving, but again we must face reality. Whilst it may be true that we have marvellous mini-computers in our pockets, we've not done very much to stop wars, famines and world poverty. For all of our medical advances and improvements, we're not really living much longer. We may have easier and perhaps more comfortable lives than our ancestors, but are we really any happier? Every advancement in technology comes with often unforeseen challenges and problems. The internet brought news, information and education to the world. It also brought easy access to pornography and an efficient way to traffic and sell children. So we should expect decline and decay. We should not live with a naive hope or expectation that a glorious future for this world awaits. Human beings, I'm afraid, will not create a paradise here on earth. Now this all sounds very negative, but of course it's not intended to be. What it means is that our hope does not rest in human beings and in their plans or schemes. Instead, our hope rests in God. He is the same yesterday, today and tomorrow. He is never subject to decline or decay. Number 3. Jesus Christ will return to rule and reign for eternity. Isn't it a reassuring thought to think that the Lord has everything under control and will one day rule and reign on this earth? That is our great hope and expectation for the future. The stone is coming. Whilst we wait, it is appropriate that we as God's people do everything that we can to alleviate suffering and to make this a safer and happier world. But with this being said, we must acknowledge that our hope is not in laws, political alliances or moral crusades. Our hope rests in the Lord Jesus Christ. Therefore, given that time may be short, we are not to be inactive. People's hearts need to be changed by the grace of God. That means that as God's people, we must be witnesses to the ends of the earth. We know that the only kingdom that will stand forever is Christ's kingdom, and the only people who will be citizens of that kingdom are those who have trusted him and who have been born again by the Spirit of God. Therefore, let us be full of urgency and zeal to go out and share the gospel with the world.
Now in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was so troubled that his sleep left him. Then the king gave the command to call the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans to tell the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king.
I have had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to know the dream.
Then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic.
O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will give the interpretation.
My decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream to me and its interpretation, you shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made an ash heap. However, if you tell the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts, rewards, and great honor. Therefore, tell me the dream and its interpretation.
Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will give its interpretation.
I know for certain that you would gain time, because you see that my decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream to me, there is only one decree for you. For you have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the time has changed. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can give me its interpretation.
There is not a man on earth who can tell the king's matter. Therefore no king, lord, or ruler has ever asked such things of any magician, astrologer, or Chaldean. It is a difficult thing that the king requests, and there is no other who can tell it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh.
For this reason the king was angry and very furious, and gave the command to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree went out, and they began killing the wise men. And they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Then, with counsel and wisdom, Daniel answered Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain,
"Why is the decree from the king so urgent?"
Then Arioch made the decision known to Daniel. So Daniel went in and asked the king to give him time, that he might tell the king the interpretation. Then Daniel went to his house and made the decision known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, that they might seek mercies from the God of heaven concerning this secret, so that Daniel and his companions might not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. So Daniel blessed the God of heaven.
Blessed be the name of God forever and ever. For wisdom and might are his, and he changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and raises up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and secret things. He knows what is in the darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank you and praise you, O God of my fathers. You have given me wisdom and might, and have now made known to me what we asked of you. For you have made known to us the king's demand.
Therefore Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus to him,
Do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Take me before the king, and I will tell the king the interpretation.
Then Arioch quickly brought Daniel before the king.
I have found a man of the captives of Judah who will make known to the king the interpretation.
The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar,
Are you able to make known to me the dream which I have seen and its interpretation?
The secret which the king has demanded, the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, and the soothsayers cannot declare to the king. But there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head upon your bed were these. As for you, O king, thoughts came to your mind while on your bed about what would come to pass after this. And he who reveals secrets has made known to you what will be. But as for me, this secret has not been revealed to me because I have more wisdom than anyone living, but for our sakes who make known the interpretation to the king, and that you may know the thoughts of your heart. You, O king, were watching, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose splendor was excellent, stood before you, and its form was awesome. This image's head was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You watched while the stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay, and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed together, and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. The wind carried them away so that no trace of them was found. And the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This is the dream. Now we will tell the interpretation of it before the king. You, O king, are a king of kings. For the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the birds of the heaven, he has given them into your hand, and has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold. But after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to yours, then another, a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. Yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure.
Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, prostrate before Daniel, and commanded that they should present an offering and incense to him.
Truly your God is the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, since you could reveal this secret.
Then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many great gifts, and he made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief administrator over all the wise men of Babylon. Also Daniel petitioned the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat in the gate of the king.